My name is Omar Sadiq. I am a 37-year-old Muslim man living in Boston, Massachusetts. I grew up in a tightly knit immigrant family, the son of Pakistani parents who, like most of the families in our community, held on to their cultural and religious values fiercely. My father was a strong figure in our house, often seen leading prayers at the mosque, and my mother, a kind woman, was the backbone of our home, quietly ensuring that everything ran smoothly. They were proud of their faith, their heritage, and their family. From a young age, I was taught the importance of faith. My family believed in service to others, kindness, and the idea that you should always be a good person in the eyes of God. I was expected to be a good son, a good brother, and a good member of the community. I worked hard to meet those expectations, helping others, giving to charity, volunteering at the mosque, always doing the right thing. I was a believer, a devout follower of Islam. But there was one part of me I could never reconcile with my faith, the truth about who I was. There was a darkness inside me that I didn't want to face, a truth I buried so deep I thought I could outrun it, hide from it forever. From the very first time I felt it, I knew something was different. I knew that the feelings I had were not what my religion had taught me to expect from a man. As I grew older, I began to understand that I was attracted to other men, but that was something I could never admit to myself. Not in a world where men like me were condemned, rejected, and hated. Not in a family where such things were never even spoken of. My faith, my culture, everything I had been taught told me that my desires were sinful, wrong, and shameful. I remember trying to pray harder, trying to convince myself that my feelings would go away, that somehow God would take them from me. I tried to drown out the whispers in my mind with the sound of my own prayers, my own pleas for forgiveness. I convinced myself that if I lived a righteous life, gave charity, helped the poor, and served my community, my secret would remain just that, something hidden, something I could never let others see. But inside, I was suffocating. Every day was a struggle to live up to the image of the man I thought I should be, a good son, a devout Muslim, a respectable member of my community. On the outside, I was everything I was supposed to be. But on the inside, I was terrified. I was terrified of being found out, terrified of the rejection I knew would come. I saw the way people like me were treated in the world around me, mocked, ridiculed, and worse, cast out. I wasn't ready to face that. I wasn't ready to lose my family, my friends, and my faith. So I buried it deep. I ignored it, hoping it would go away, but it never did. At the same time, I was always giving. I had a small business, a humble little convenience store that I ran with my brother, and I was always volunteering, always trying to be the best I could be in the eyes of others. I even took part in various charity events, helping the less fortunate and offering my time and resources. I would be the one people called when they needed help, and I was always happy to give. I saw it as my way of compensating for the darkness I carried inside me. If I could just do enough good, maybe it would be enough to make up for my flaws, my sins, but no amount of giving could fix what was inside me. The guilt, the shame, the confusion, it all sat with me like a weight, like a burden that I could never put down. I tried dating women, trying to force myself into the mold I thought I was supposed to fit into, but it never felt right. I could never make myself believe that this was the life I was meant to live. No matter how much I tried to force myself to live according to the rules of my faith, the truth kept creeping back in. I was living a lie. And deep down, I knew it. But I couldn't face it. I couldn't accept it. It was the summer of 2019 when everything changed. It was a normal day, at least on the surface. I had just finished running some errands for the store, and I was on my way home, walking down the street like I had done 100 times before. I don't remember much about that day, not the details or the conversations I had, just the feeling of walking, of the sun shining down on me and the hum of the city around me. I remember thinking about my life, about the weight I was carrying inside, about the way I kept pretending to be someone I wasn't. I felt something, a strange, unsettling sensation in the air, like the world was shifting in a way I couldn't understand. Then suddenly I felt something hard strike the back of my head, a flash of pain followed by nothingness. The world went dark, and then I was gone. The first thing I remember after the darkness is a sense of weightlessness. For a moment, I thought I was dreaming, caught between the realms of sleep and wakefulness. But there was something different about this feeling. It wasn't like any dream I'd ever had. There was no discomfort, no fear, only a profound, serene calm. I was floating. It wasn't a physical floating, not in the sense I knew from earthly experience. I didn't feel the pull of gravity, the weight of my body. Instead, I simply was. My mind was awake, fully aware, yet completely detached from the physical realm I had known. And the strangest thing, there was no pain. None at all. I had been struck in the head, I knew that much, but there was no ache, no throbbing sensation in my skull. There was only this eerie silence, followed by a growing awareness that I was no longer there. I turned my attention downward, and my body, my earthly body, lay motionless on the pavement below. I could see it clearly, the way it sprawled out awkwardly on the street, surrounded by a crowd of onlookers, some bent over, trying to help, others simply standing, watching, frozen in place by the suddenness of what had occurred. But none of it seemed real anymore. I wasn't that body. I wasn't the man who had walked down that street moments ago. I wasn't even the man who had lived for 37 years, struggling with his identity, his faith, his deepest truth. I felt utterly disconnected from it all. I could see the worried expressions on people's faces as they knelt by my side, but I didn't feel fear. I didn't feel concern for myself. It was as if I was watching a scene in a movie, a reality that wasn't mine, something happening to someone else, distant and unimportant. The longer I lingered in that place, the more I realized that I was free from my body, free from the burdens I had carried for so long. There was no anxiety, no guilt, no shame. For the first time in my life, I felt like I could breathe. I didn't have to hide. I didn't have to pretend. I could feel something drawing me. It wasn't a force I could explain, but it was a pull, compelling, gentle, yet firm. It called to me, and I followed it. As I moved through the air, past the bustling figures below, I saw the city stretched out beneath me like a patchwork quilt. Boston, my home. The buildings, the streets, the familiar landmarks all appeared so small from this vantage point. I moved beyond them into a vast open space that seemed to stretch forever. And then I felt it. A presence. Not a person, not a form, but something that filled the air, thick and pure. A light appeared before me, growing brighter and brighter until it seemed to encompass everything. It wasn't a blinding light, but a radiant, soothing glow that exuded warmth and peace. And then I heard the voice. It was a voice I recognized, though I had never heard it in my earthly life. It was soft yet powerful, filled with understanding and compassion. Omar, I knew immediately who it was, Jesus. The light around me seemed to pulse as his presence enveloped me, and I felt a calmness settle in my heart. There were no words exchanged at first, just an overwhelming sense of being seen, truly seen, without judgment, without condemnation. It was as though every part of me, every secret I had buried deep within was laid bare in that moment. There was no shame, no wrath, only understanding. And then I understood. I was no longer the man I had been, the man trapped in his denial, afraid of facing the truth. The person I thought I was had vanished, and in its place I felt a sense of being, a sense of clarity I had never known in my life. I had lived so long in conflict, so long struggling to reconcile my faith with the truth of who I was. But here in this place, there was no conflict. There was only acceptance. And then I saw it. Behind the brilliant light, figures emerged, souls, each trapped in the same kind of turmoil I had known in my earthly life. I saw their faces, distorted by suffering, and I heard their cries, weak, distant. I couldn't see clearly at first, but as I focused, I began to recognize them. One by one, Jesus pointed to the figures in the distance, each appearing to be trapped in the flames of an immense, suffocating heat. Their faces were contorted in pain, their voices faint but audible, carried by an invisible wind. "Look at him," Jesus said, his voice gentle but filled with sorrow. "This one too, this one too, this one too." He pointed to the first figure, an older man with a deeply furrowed face, his body twisted in agony. I could see the shame in his eyes, the guilt, the years of self-denial, and I understood then. This man, this soul had hidden his truth for so long, had feared to face it, had let his shame define him. "Look at him," Jesus repeated. "He hid his truth from himself for years." Then, another figure, a young woman, barely in her 20s. She too was trapped in flames, her eyes wide with horror. She was trying to scream, but no sound came out, and again I felt the overwhelming weight of recognition. This one too, Jesus said. She never accepted herself, lived a lie to avoid the pain of rejection, and so she has condemned herself. I felt a deep, aching sadness. And then it was as if I saw myself standing among them. I recognized the faces of people like me, those who had never embraced their truth. My truth, the truth I had buried for so long. "Do you see them, Omar?" Jesus asked, his voice low, filled with compassion and pity. "This is the result of denial. This is the consequence of refusing to accept who you truly are." The words hit me like a thunderclap. I had spent my life running from the truth, rejecting it, hating it. And now I saw the cost of that rejection. I saw where it led. I understood for the first time the weight of my own self-denial. I felt the tears form, not of sadness, but of regret. I felt the burden of a lifetime of hidden truths, a lifetime of hiding behind the mask I had created. But I knew, in that moment, that I was not alone in my struggle. I could feel the souls around me, trapped in the same torment, the same denial, and I knew that, like them, I had condemned myself to this suffering for far too long. The realization came to me slowly, like a dawning light. This wasn't just about me. It wasn't just about my hidden desires or my faith. It was about the brokenness of the world itself, the way people hide from their own truths, the way they bury what they fear. The suffering I had seen was not just mine, it was the suffering of everyone who had ever hidden, who had ever denied who they truly were. It was the suffering of the world itself. And in that moment, I understood the depth of my own denial. I understood that in rejecting myself, I had participated in the very thing that had brought so much pain to this world. I wasn't just rejecting me, I was rejecting the truth of others too. The truth that we all share, that we are all human, with our struggles and our flaws, our secrets and our shame. But Jesus in his infinite mercy had come to show me something else. He was not here to condemn me. He was here to offer me a chance to change. As the warmth of the light continued to surround me, I felt something shift within me, a kind of pull that was not just physical, but spiritual. It was a beckoning to something deeper, something more profound than the confusion and pain I had felt during my life. The voice of Jesus was still with me, not distant, but inside me, echoing through my very being. "Omar," he spoke again, his voice calm yet piercing. "You have been lost for so long, caught between the man you wish to be and the man you truly are. But I am here to show you the truth of your heart. You do not need to hide anymore." His words echoed in my mind, and I felt my heart swell with a strange mixture of grief and relief. I had always feared facing my truth, hiding my true self from the world, fearing rejection from my family, my friends, and from God. In my faith, I had been taught that denying one's desires, that living a life of obedience to God's laws, was the highest calling. But in doing so, I had betrayed myself. I had concealed a part of who I was that now seemed so clear to me, so obvious. My love for men, my desire to be fully myself, was not some sin to be buried in shame. It was a part of me that I needed to embrace. But this moment was not just about me, about coming to terms with my identity. Jesus had shown me the faces of others, those who had hidden their truths just as I had. I had seen them burning in the flames of hell, condemned not by God's wrath, but by their own denial of their true selves. It was as if they had chosen to remain in the darkness of their own souls, refusing to accept the light of truth that was freely offered to them. I felt Jesus looking at me, not with anger, but with sorrow. "Omar," he repeated gently, his voice full of deep compassion. "Look at them. These are not your enemies. These are people who, like you, could not accept who they were. They lived in fear of judgment, of being cast aside by the world. But they too are my children, and they too have been lost." The weight of his words pressed down on me, and I felt the enormity of what I had seen. The faces in the flames, they were people who, like me, had hidden parts of themselves, rejecting the truth in favor of denial. I realized then that I wasn't alone. I wasn't the only one who had wrestled with his true nature, struggling in silence, feeling unworthy and unloved. There were others out there, so many others, who had suffered in the same way, who had lived their lives in torment, shackled by their own fear. Jesus pointed toward another figure in the distance, one I hadn't yet noticed, a man who looked about my age, his face etched with years of pain and regret. He stood amidst the flames, his eyes wide with terror. "This one too," Jesus said, his voice soft but filled with a quiet sadness. This man struggled to accept the love I have for him. He feared he was beyond redemption because of his desires, his mistakes, but he was never beyond my grace. Tears welled up in my eyes as I saw the truth of Jesus' words. I had lived in constant fear of rejection, fear that I was unworthy of God's love, unworthy of acceptance. And yet, here was Jesus, pointing to these souls, not with anger, but with a profound sorrow for the suffering that they and I had endured. The fear of being unloved, of being rejected by God, was a lie. The truth was that he loved all of us, no matter the struggles, the mistakes, the hidden truths we carried. It was our refusal to embrace ourselves, to embrace his love for us, that kept us trapped in darkness. I felt the pull of his gaze, and it seemed as though he could see right through me, into the deepest recesses of my soul. "Omar," he said, his voice barely a whisper, yet louder than any thunder, "you have feared your truth for so long. You have hidden from it, ashamed of who you are, but you must know this. I see you, and I love you. You are my beloved child, and you are not alone in this." As his words washed over me, I felt a warmth in my chest, a warmth that spread through my whole being, filling every corner of my soul with peace. I realized in that instant that the fear I had carried, the shame I had locked away, was unnecessary. It had been the weight of self-rejection that had condemned me, not God's judgment, but my own refusal to accept his love for me. I wanted to speak, to confess, to ask for forgiveness, but there were no words. The feeling of being enveloped in his love was so overwhelming that speech felt irrelevant. There was only the deep, abiding truth that I had been forgiven, that I had been loved all along, even in my darkest moments of self-doubt. Jesus stepped closer, and for the first time, I noticed something in his eyes, an invitation. It wasn't a command, but a gentle, loving request. He was inviting me to embrace my truth, to accept who I was, and to stop hiding. "There is no shame in being who you are," he said softly. "You are not a mistake. You are my creation, and I have made you exactly as you are for a reason. You must accept this truth. Only then can you begin to heal, not just yourself, but the world around you." His words hung in the air, and for a moment, I felt as though time itself had stopped. The full weight of his message hit me with a force I couldn't have anticipated. This wasn't just about me. This was about the world I was a part of. This was about the healing I could bring to others if I could only accept my own truth. I felt a deep longing within me, a call to do something more, to share the message of love and acceptance that Jesus was offering me. The world, as I had seen earlier, was broken. People were divided, hurting, living in denial of their true selves. But the healing I had received, this peace, this acceptance, could be shared. But first, I had to accept myself. "Your journey has only just begun," Jesus said, his voice firm now, as though he were preparing me for what was to come. "You must go back, Omar. Time is running out. There is much work to be done." I didn't want to leave. I wanted to stay in this place of peace, to remain in the presence of Jesus forever, but his words filled me with an urgency, a sense of responsibility that I couldn't ignore. There was more for me to do, more for me to learn, more for me to share. "You will go back," he said again, his gaze full of love. "But remember this, only when you accept who you are, truly accept it, can you begin to heal yourself in the world. Your truth is the key." And with that, I felt the world around me begin to shift. The light that had enveloped me began to fade, and I felt myself being pulled back, away from the peace I had known, back toward the world I had left behind. The pull was stronger now, and it was as if I had no choice but to follow it. It was time to return. As I felt myself being pulled away from the warm, comforting light, a new, colder sensation began to envelop me. The soft warmth of Jesus' embrace slipped away, and I found myself thrust into a harsh, brutal darkness. My surroundings became chaotic, a swirling vortex of intense heat and sounds that were unlike anything I had ever heard. There was a palpable sense of suffering in the air, a thick, suffocating atmosphere that was filled with cries of anguish and despair. Suddenly, the temperature shifted. It became suffocatingly hot, the kind of heat that burned the skin and drained every ounce of energy. I realized I was no longer floating in the peaceful, serene realm I had just experienced. I was standing in a place of torment, a place that defied words. The air was thick with the scent of smoke, the stench of decay and suffering. I felt like I was drowning, surrounded by intense darkness and fire. I wanted to scream, to cry out for help, but there was no voice, no sound. I was mute. The only noise that existed was the horrific wails of the damned, the lost souls that had fallen into this abyss. The souls trapped in this place were not merely burning from flames, they were burning from within, their very souls in torment, caught in an eternal state of despair. Then I saw them. Figures in the distance, shadows of people who seemed to be bound by chains of their own making. Their faces were contorted with pain, their eyes hollow and full of fear. Some were screaming out, but their voices never reached anyone. They were trapped in their own suffering, each one bound by an invisible force that kept them from escaping. And I knew. These souls were not condemned because of any wrath from God. They were condemned because of their own refusal to face the truth of who they were. They had chosen to hide from the light, to deny the love that was always available to them. I saw faces I recognized, faces of people who had lived in denial. I saw men, like myself, who had buried their own truth. I saw people who had carried burdens of shame, self-loathing, and fear their entire lives. These were not evil people. These were the lost, the rejected, the ones who had fought against their true selves and had been consumed by their own rejection of who they were. Then I felt a familiar presence beside me, a presence that I recognized instantly. It was Jesus, and he was standing by my side, looking down at the suffering below. His face was not angry. It was filled with sorrow, sorrow for the souls that were lost in their own torment, trapped in a hell they had created for themselves. He spoke to me in a voice full of compassion, yet heavy with the gravity of the truth he was about to reveal. "Look at them, Omar," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "These are the souls that have denied themselves, their true selves. They have refused to accept the love I offer them. They have rejected the truth of who they are, and in doing so, they have condemned themselves to this suffering." I turned my eyes to the figures in the flames, and as I did, a cold chill ran through me. I saw faces that mirrored my own fears, my own struggles. There were men who, like me, had lived in secrecy, trying to suppress the truth of their identity, afraid to embrace the love that Jesus offered. There were women who had buried their own truths, trapped in the pain of self-denial. But what struck me the most were the eyes of those souls that seemed to scream out in agony, begging for release. They looked not at Jesus, but at themselves, caught in their own internal battle, unable to accept the very truth that could set them free. Jesus looked at me then, his eyes filled with an unfathomable sadness. "They are not here because I wanted them to be," he said softly. "They are here because they chose to hide from their truth. They chose to believe that they were beyond love, beyond forgiveness, but none of them are beyond redemption, Omar." The weight of his words struck me like a blow to the chest. I had lived my life in fear of rejection, convinced that I would be cast away by God if I ever truly embraced who I was. I had carried that fear with me every single day, and now, standing in this place, I could see the consequences of that denial. Souls, just like mine, trapped in torment because they had been too afraid to accept the love and acceptance God was offering them. I felt a deep sorrow welling up inside me as I looked at the faces of those lost souls. They were not unlike me. We had all been afraid. We had all feared what would happen if we embraced our truth. We had all believed the lie that love could be earned only through perfection, through hiding who we truly were. Jesus continued, his voice full of compassion. "Omar, this is why I'm showing you this. This is why I brought you here. You have struggled with your truth for so long, but you must know you are not like these souls. You still have a chance to change, to accept who you are, and to live freely in the truth of my love for you." For the first time, I truly understood what he was saying. I had feared the flames of hell all my life, thinking they were reserved for those who had sinned too greatly, for those who had rejected God. But I now realized that hell was not a place reserved for punishment alone. It was a place of self-rejection, a place where souls were trapped by their own inability to accept the truth of who they were. The souls in hell were not lost because of their sin, but because they refused to accept the love of God and the truth of their identity. They had condemned themselves to this place, not through their actions, but through their denial. "Please," I whispered as I looked at Jesus, "show me the way. I don't want to be like them." His eyes softened, and he placed his hand gently on my shoulder. "You are not like them, Omar. You are here in this moment because you still have the chance to make a choice. You must accept yourself, your truth, and your love for me. Only then can you heal." With those words, I felt a surge of hope rise within me. I was not lost. I had a chance to change, to embrace my truth, and, in doing so, help heal the brokenness I had seen in the world. But that healing would only begin when I could accept myself, when I could stop hiding in the shadows of shame and step into the light of truth. I looked back one last time at the figures in the flames, and I felt a deep, unshakable conviction in my heart. I would not let their suffering be in vain. I would not let my own suffering be in vain. I would choose to live in the light, to accept who I was, and to help others do the same. And with that, the darkness began to recede, and I felt myself being drawn away once again, back toward the light. I wasn't prepared for what came next. After being pulled from the torment of that fiery abyss, I was swept into another vision. A vision not of darkness, but of the world I had left behind. The world that still lived and breathed, unaware of the profound change that was happening in me. I felt myself being carried, weightless, and yet grounded in the truth of what I was witnessing. I found myself hovering over Earth, gazing down at its vast expanse. The scene below me was not idyllic or peaceful. No, the world was a swirling storm of confusion, suffering, and division. From above, I could see the patterns of hatred and conflict, the struggles between nations, communities, families. It was as if the earth itself was in a constant state of turmoil, fueled by hatred, greed, and a desperate need for validation. The suffering was tangible. I could feel the pain of the world seeping into my very being as I watched. It was in the slums of the cities, the battlefields, the broken homes. It was in the faces of the children who cried out for love and security, yet never found it. It was in the eyes of the old, weary souls who had lived their lives in fear and loneliness, searching for meaning in a world that seemed to have abandoned them. But what struck me the most were the divisions between people. It wasn't just the violence of war or the cruelty of oppression. It was something deeper, something more insidious. It was the division within hearts, the subtle yet ever-present belief that one person was superior to another. It was in the prejudice, the racism, the hatred toward those who were different. I saw families torn apart by misunderstandings, friendships broken by pride, communities divided by ignorance and fear. I saw groups of people bound by their ideologies and beliefs, waging wars of words and actions, convinced that they were in the right while the other was wrong. The world was spinning out of control, its heartbreaking, and no one seemed to understand that the source of its pain was not external. It was internal. It was within the hearts of every person. And then, amidst this chaos, I saw Jesus again. This time, he was not standing beside me, but he was standing in the midst of it all. His eyes were filled with both sorrow and hope, as though he could see the suffering that surrounded us, yet he knew that there was still a way out, a path toward healing. He turned to me, and his gaze seemed to pierce through me, as though he could see into the very depths of my soul. "You are part of this, Omar," he said softly. "You are part of this brokenness. Your fear, your denial, it contributes to this world's suffering. You are not separate from it. You have lived your life in hiding, and because of that, you have perpetuated the same cycle of fear and denial that the world is trapped in." His words hit me like a wave crashing against a shore. I had always seen myself as separate from the world, as though I could exist outside of its troubles. But now, in this moment, I understood. My own refusal to accept myself, to live openly and truthfully, had added to the pain and division in the world. I had become a part of the very system of denial that kept humanity trapped in darkness. Jesus continued, his voice filled with urgency. "But there is hope, Omar. There is always hope. The world can heal, but it starts with you. You must accept who you are. Your denial is not just yours, it is the world's. When you embrace your truth, when you live authentically, you will help break this cycle. You will help heal this broken world." His words echoed in my mind, reverberating with a weight I could not deny. I had thought my struggles were isolated, that my fears were my own to bear. But now I saw that they were a reflection of the world's struggles. The world, too, was trapped in denial, in a refusal to accept the truth of who it was. The lies we told ourselves, the fear we harbored, had permeated every part of society. Jesus turned his gaze back to earth, his eyes full of sorrow. "Look at them, Omar," he whispered. "They do not see the light, and yet the light is there. They do not understand that the answer lies not in fighting against each other, but in embracing who they truly are. You must help them see this." I saw what he was talking about. People tearing each other apart, fighting for power, fighting for validation. Yet they did not realize that the true power came from love, from self-acceptance, from recognizing the divinity within themselves and in others. The world was blind to this truth, and it was suffering because of it. As I hovered above, I felt the weight of Jesus' words settling on me. There was no way to escape the truth of what he was saying. The suffering of the world was not just a series of isolated incidents. It was the consequence of a deep, collective denial of self. Each person, trapped in their own fear and rejection, added to the chaos. And until we all learned to accept who we were, to embrace the truth of our identity, this cycle would never end. The vision shifted, and I felt myself being drawn closer to earth, as though the weight of what I had witnessed was now becoming my responsibility to bear. Jesus' voice came again, soft but commanding. "Your role in this is not just about you, Omar. It's about all of them. You must accept who you are, and you must help them see who they truly are. The world is waiting for you to step into your truth." And in that moment, I knew what I had to do. I could no longer hide. I could no longer live in the shadows of fear and shame. I had to embrace the light of truth, not only for my own healing, but for the healing of the world. I had to be the change, to break the cycle of denial, and to show others the way. I could feel myself being pulled away, back from the weight of that moment. It wasn't as though I was falling, but I was drifting, like a leaf caught in a gentle breeze. The light around me grew brighter, and I realized with a heavy heart that I was leaving the world behind once again, leaving the suffering and the turmoil, the faces of the people who were trapped, the faces of those who had not yet found the truth. But even as I began to move further away from the earth, I felt Jesus' presence beside me once again, his voice filled with a new urgency. His words were not just a message, they were a command. "Go back, Omar," he said, his tone firm and unyielding. "You have a mission. The world is broken, and time is running out. You must return, for there are people who are waiting for you. But before you can help them, you must first accept your own truth. You are still captive to your own fear, your own denial." His words struck me deeply, like a bell ringing in the silence of my soul. I thought that the work was done, that somehow, in that brief moment of understanding, I had already become the person I needed to be. But I was wrong. I still had a long way to go. I still had to confront the parts of me that I had been running from for so long, the parts of me that I had feared, the parts that I had kept hidden, buried deep within. "You cannot go back to the world until you are whole, Omar," Jesus continued, his voice growing softer but still filled with urgency. "You cannot heal others until you heal yourself. You must accept who you are fully and completely. Only then can you fulfill your purpose." I felt a deep sense of longing within me, a desire to stay in that moment of peace, that moment of clarity. The world I had known, with its struggles and confusion, seemed so far away, almost irrelevant. The pain, the fear, the shame, they felt like distant memories, like a nightmare that was no longer mine. But Jesus' words were clear. The work was not yet finished. The healing had not yet begun. "You have to return to that world, Omar," he said, his eyes filled with both sorrow and compassion. "The world is waiting for your light. But you cannot bring that light if you are still living in the darkness of your own heart. You must be free." I was filled with a sense of terror and awe at the same time. How could I go back to that world? How could I return to a life that I had been running from for so long? The idea of accepting who I truly was, of shedding the layers of denial that I had wrapped myself in for so long, felt like a mountain too steep to climb. It felt impossible. But then something within me stirred. It wasn't just fear. It was something else, something stronger, more persistent. It was the call to fulfill my purpose, the reason I had been given this second chance. The world had not been created to be broken. It had been created for love, for truth, for acceptance. And if I was to live the truth that I had seen in that moment, then I had to return, not just for me, but for the world. Jesus' voice grew softer, but it still carried the weight of his mission for me. "Remember, Omar," he said, his words penetrating my very soul, "it is not your own strength that will carry you. It is my love, my grace, that will sustain you. You will not be alone in this journey, but you must go back. You must accept your truth, and in doing so, you will help others find their own." And as those words resonated deep within me, I felt a surge of energy, a clarity I had never known before. I was not alone in this fight. I was not alone in the struggle to accept who I was. Jesus was with me, and I could feel his presence, not just as a figure of the past, but as a living force, guiding me, supporting me, urging me forward. But even as the vision of Jesus began to fade, I felt my heart sink. I didn't want to leave. I wanted to stay in that place of peace, where everything was clear and all the pain seemed so far away. I wasn't ready to face the world again, not with all its confusion and suffering. Yet, I knew that the work was just beginning. I had to return. I had to go back, even if it meant facing the very things I had spent my life avoiding. And then, as the light began to fade completely, Jesus' voice echoed one final time, carrying with it both love and an unmistakable command. "You must go back, Omar. Your journey is not over." I woke up with a jolt. My body was heavy, stiff, as though it had been lying still for a long time. The sterile smell of the hospital flooded my senses, mixing with a sense of confusion and dread. My eyes flickered open, but the world around me felt distant, almost unreal. It took a moment for everything to come into focus. I was in a hospital bed, hooked up to an IV drip, surrounded by the soft beeping of medical monitors. The light from the room's fluorescent bulbs seemed almost harsh, yet it was the only thing that felt real in this moment. I blinked a few times, trying to piece together the fragments of my memory. The accident, the impact, the darkness, and then the vision, the light, Jesus, the suffering of the world. It all came rushing back to me in a tidal wave. I was no longer in the realm between life and death. I was back. I had returned. But the man I had been before, I didn't recognize him, or rather, I no longer wanted to be him. The person who had hidden behind the mask of faith, the man who had concealed his true identity out of fear and shame, was no longer the man I was. No, that man was gone, and in his place was something else, something that had been awakened, something that had been set free. I didn't fully understand it yet, but I knew my life had changed. I had seen the truth about myself, about the world, and about my purpose. Jesus had told me I had a mission to fulfill, and I could feel it in every fiber of my being. But the question still lingered. How? How could I go back into the world, into a life I had spent so long running from? How could I live authentically when so much of my life had been built on lies and denial? The nurses came in to check on me, their faces warm with concern, but I was far beyond the mundane concerns of physical healing. Yes, my body had been injured, but it was my spirit that had been broken, and it was my spirit that was being rebuilt. The physical pain was nothing compared to the transformation I had experienced in the realms beyond death. Once they left, I was left in the stillness of the room, alone with my thoughts. I sat up slowly, my body feeling foreign to me, as though I had to relearn what it meant to inhabit this space. The world outside the hospital room seemed impossibly far away, like I was on the edge of some great divide, caught between the old and the new. I remembered Jesus' words, "You must accept who you are fully and completely. Only then can you fulfill your purpose." My heart sank, and for a moment, doubt crept in. Could I really do it? Could I step into the light after so many years of living in the shadows? I had built an entire life around denial. I had a family to think about, a community, a faith that had shaped me. But in that quiet, holy moment, I realized that the truth was undeniable. I could not go back to the man I had been. I had to live my truth, for myself, for my family, for the world. I could no longer hide. A wave of clarity washed over me. I knew that embracing who I was didn't mean rejecting my faith. It didn't mean abandoning my family or my community. It meant integrating my true self into all of it. No longer hiding, no longer living in fear of judgment or rejection. It meant showing up as the person God had created me to be, with love, compassion, and authenticity. It wasn't going to be easy. I knew that. But I also knew that I was no longer alone. I had felt the presence of Jesus in that realm, urging me to go back and embrace the mission he had given me. He was with me, and he would continue to guide me. The strength I had sought in the past through denial and repression was now being replaced by the strength of truth and acceptance. The phone on the bedside table buzzed, interrupting my thoughts. I reached for it, instinctively checking to see if anyone had been trying to reach me. It was my mother. My heart tightened. I had been avoiding her calls for weeks, too afraid to tell her the truth about my life, about my struggles. Now everything felt different. The old fear was no longer in control. I answered the phone. "Hello?" I said, my voice sounding unfamiliar. "Omar?" Her voice cracked with concern. "How are you feeling? The doctors said you're awake. Are you okay?" I paused, my mind racing. This was the moment. This was the call that had been waiting to happen for so long. "Mom," I said, my voice steady but filled with emotion. "I need to talk to you. I've been hiding something from you for a long time. Something that I can no longer keep inside. I need to be honest with you about who I really am." There was a silence on the other end of the line, a silence that seemed to stretch on for an eternity. My heart pounded in my chest as I waited for her response. "Omar," she finally said, her voice small but filled with love. "Whatever it is, I'm here. I love you. You're my son. You don't have to hide from me." In that moment, I knew that I was not alone. I had feared this conversation, feared that my truth would drive a wedge between me and the people I loved. But the love I felt from her in that moment was enough to lift the weight off my shoulders. I wasn't alone. I wasn't rejected. I took a deep breath, feeling a weight lifting off me. The fear, the shame, the denial, they were all being swept away, and in their place, I felt free. I had a long road ahead of me. There were conversations to have, challenges to face, and a world to change. But now, I was no longer afraid to walk that road. I was no longer afraid to embrace the mission that had been given to me. As I sat there in the hospital room, looking out the window at the world outside, I knew that I had a purpose to live in truth, to help others embrace their authentic selves, and to heal the brokenness I had witnessed. The world was suffering, but together we could heal it. Together, we could break the chains of denial that kept us in darkness. And so my mission began.